Hey guys, welcome to A Little Hope for Our Friends, the podcast for people with loved ones struggling with mental health. We share insights from science, clinical practice, and our personal lives to help you support friends and family with mental or emotional problems. I'm your host, Jacqueline Trumbull, a former Bachelor contestant turned clinical psychology PhD candidate at Duke University, and this is my co-host, Dr. Kibby McMahon.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kibby, clinical psychologist and co-founder of Coolamind, the official community for this podcast. Check out our website, kulamind.com, to get support navigating the ups and downs of your most emotionally challenging relationships.
And if you want to share your story or questions with us for future episodes, tap the link in your show notes to text us or email us at littlehelpforourfriends@gmail.com. We hope you love the podcast. Hello, little helpers. Today, I say this every time, I think, but today is another fun one. We are going to be talking about plastic surgery, which might seem like a departure from what we normally do, but I think the topic of, well, let me back up. I think a lot of people get plastic surgery in part because of body image issues, right? Which is really central to mental health. And I remember in health class watching this video that was like warning us against any kind of plastic surgery because it showed this woman with body dysmorphic disorder and she was just getting surgery after surgery after surgery after surgery. And it was presented as like, look, this will make your problems bigger. And I'm really excited to find out whether that's true. Like, from a research perspective, what do we know about plastic surgery? And the other thing that's exciting is that we've got two guinea pigs with you guys right now because Kibby and I both at basically the same time got plastic surgery. So, so Kibby, I'll turn it over to you to begin.
Well, first I'll let people know about Coolamind. So, when you're listening to all of our tips and insights into relationship difficulties or mental health difficulties, we really wanted to help you guys apply our tips and these evidence-based strategies to your daily life to actually make changes. Because we got a lot of requests for that. Like, how do I actually get out of this abusive relationship? How do I heal from it? How do I stop dating the wrong people? How do I actually get self-esteem after having narcissistic parents? So we built Coolamind, Kulamind. There's a platform that actually teaches you these strategies through one-on-one coaching, resources, and community support. So if you are curious about it, just go to coolamind.com, or it's the URL is in the link is in the show notes. And or if you just want to ask us about it, there's a place where you can actually click and say, send Kibby and Jacqueline a text, so you can actually text us directly about anything. Text us about your plastic surgery because I'm so curious what this has been like for everyone else besides for us. So
Uh,
go
hey,
ahead, plastic surgery.
well, you took the research brunt on this. We are both like newly recovering from surgeries. And I don't know, I think it's an interesting topic because uh, I think that there's this attitude where it's like if you get plastic surgery, you've given up on loving yourself or something.
Hmm.
You had the unique experience of like you didn't just get a vanity surgery. You had breast cancer and
Hmm.
so you got new boobs and that's like a super I don't think anybody's going to judge you for that. I got a vanity surgery. I got liposuction. Um, and I don't know, it's an interesting question. Like if you get liposuction or if you get a nose job or something, have you like given up on self-love? Have you have you decided like actually, you know what? I can't love myself as I am, so I'm going to do this surgery and therefore you never kind of solve your own problem? Or is it something very different from that? I don't know. Do you have initial thoughts?
My initial thought is that the first thing that comes to mind with plastic surgery is the extreme versions, like
Yeah.
uh, all the all the celebrities who got huge boob jobs, or Michael Jackson, right? Like ones that are so extreme that and they look terrible. Like I think that a lot of these actresses that do crazy things to their face where they can't even move their face is so obvious and terrible. that I've always had a negative view of plastic surgery. I was always like, oh, you're just chasing a youth or a version of yourself, a standard, an ideal that you'll never reach. And so you're constantly going to chase it, and it's going to cost like thousands of dollars and put your
Mhm.
life at risk because it's a surgery. So I was
Mhm.
always like super negative about it until I got it. Now I'm all pro.
Oh yeah, I mean it's kind of exciting to go plastic surgery shopping if you can afford it and be like, what can I change about myself now? How do I protect myself further?
I know. You and I came from such different ends of the spectrum. I was always like, natural, natural, natural. I'll never do plastic surgery. And you were always like, yeah, one day I'm going to do stuff to myself.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny when I was on The Bachelor, people made a lot of assumptions about me, and like some of and I'll just talk right now about the flattering assumptions. Like some were nice, she's smart and ambitious and yada yada. But I think that a lot of virtue was attached to me for things that really was just because I couldn't afford certain things yet. I mean, yeah, a lot of girls on my season had plastic surgery, and I was sort of proud of myself for not having it, but that's also because I felt like I didn't need to do anything to my face. I mean, I don't think they needed to do anything to their faces either, but
What
I
do they
couldn't
do?
afford
What's like the most common on The Bachelor? What was the.
a lot of boobs, a lot of boobs. And I
Uh
had
huh.
boobs, right? So I wasn't going to get implants. A lot of lip filler. That's not plastic surgery, but I think we should, talk about like does that fall under the camp of like deserving a ton of judgment too? Stuff like
Mm.
fillers. What else? A lot of nose jobs. I think that was probably. I have no idea about liposuction. That might have existed, but mostly
Mm.
boobs,
Hmm.
lips, noses.
So crazy. Even as you're talking about it, I'm like, ugh, but
Well, it's funny. And so
I've gotten the most at this
what I
point.
was yeah, people would say like she's so natural. She's such a natural beauty. It's so nice that she doesn't do these things to herself. It's like, yeah, well, just you wait till I age. I mean, I don't, I don't have any plans to age without a fight. So, I mean, I'm just as vain as anybody else. And I've hated my body for a very long time, and I've subjected all sorts of people to constant commentary on it, as you know. I mean, you got this just yesterday. Um, and so, did I give up on loving my body? Yes, I did. But I also don't know that it was a massive value of mine to get there.
So I mean, this is up to you. Do you want to describe what you got? Like what kind of surgery you got?
Yeah,
Lipo, but
I got lipo under my chin, which was a
mhm.
major insecurity area for like ever. I got it on my stomach, which was the other massive insecurity area for like ever. And I got it on my back, which I wasn't insecure about, but I didn't want fat to grow there. And the reason I did all of this, just to be clear, was because I got an unlimited lipo for a super cheap price package, so I could just keep adding shit. Um, so the extent of my lipo isn't necessarily the extent of like my self-hatred or anything, but because I got very cheap lipo because I got a fellow to do it. So that's a pro tip for
Yeah.
anybody
And
interested in
also
getting.
you were thinking about you got a Groupon for Kybella, which I'll put a plug against. Apparently, plastic surgeons are like, do not do this. It doesn't work. Kybella's you could explain what Kybella is.
Okay, so Kybella, I mean, I don't know a ton about it, but basically, it's injectables that it's mostly used for under the chin area, like double chin, and they dissolve the fat, ostensibly, supposedly.
So
Alleg-
apparently, plastic surgeons say that it is the worst plastic surgery procedure they've seen. It doesn't actually work. So you like are injecting the stuff under your chin. It's supposed to melt it away, but it doesn't melt it away evenly. So sometimes you could get a lumpy chin, and like the bullfrog effect. You blow up
Yeah,
for a while, and then it goes back to like lumpy. So apparently, it's really not worth it.
yeah,
So you get a little lipo underneath your chin, which I didn't know was a thing until.
yeah. I didn't know I could afford it until this fellow came along, and offered me like grad school prices, apparently. Um, yeah, so. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I wonder if there would be the same judgment associated with Kybella as there is with like full on lipo. I don't know, because one puts you under the knife, but the other one actually has like a worse recovery. So, does the judgment come from why can't people love themselves? Does it come from people are putting themselves at risk to just look prettier?
Mm.
Does it come from people are tricking us by not actually being as pretty as they appear to be naturally? But yeah, a lot of I was like the natural girl on The Bachelor, and I was totally natural at that point, and I still primarily am. But I mean, I have bionic eyes. My eggs are frozen. I mean, I will totally go under the knife to improve myself. I have no problem with that. I just also want to be able to recognize myself.
How did it affect your self-esteem? Like, did it have the effects that you wanted? Were you, I mean, one of the things that I read in the research is patients' expectations of the outcome and having realistic expectation is one of the main things about what can affect your mental health. Because people who think it's going to help them reach perfection or this like idealized view of themselves, if they have body dysmorphia, they can never
Yeah.
actually reach because their view of perfection is constantly like a carrot on a stick kind of thing. But so with your expectations, do you feel like you had realistic ones? Like, how do you feel now?
Okay. I think if I had spent ten to $20,000 on this, I would feel a little bit differently than how I feel after spending $4,000 on this.
Hmm.
4,000, which was also a bit of a crowdfunded effort. You People like my mom put in because she caused this mess in the first place. So, I was willing to accept a lot of outcomes for that low of a price and something I never thought I'd be able to afford. I can genuinely say that I like my body now. I like look forward to taking off my clothes and looking in the mirror. And basically what happened with me is I have never liked my body. I've always thought I had strange proportions. It was hard to find clothes that fit. The biggest problem was my fat distribution pattern. I gain weight in my face and my torso. I've got the apple distribution, which just sucks. So anytime I gained any little bit of weight, I'd still have these like little spider legs and like no ass, but I would have a stomach. So like jeans didn't fit, clothes didn't. I mean, it was just such a pain in the ass in so many ways. And what happened was I gained 15 pounds over the last 2 years, which I think is due to my antidepressant, but it also might be due to being 33. I don't know. But suddenly, before where I couldn't change my fat distribution pattern, but I could like lose a couple pounds if I needed to. And I was always very low weight. Um, so I at least could always comfort myself, like I'm a size extra small, I'm only 115 pounds. Now suddenly my clothes weren't fitting and I didn't feel like I had any control over my weight. I could like eat 1,500 calories a day and wouldn't lose anything. Um, I was working out, wasn't losing anything. And that made me fucking crazy. And I was just like basically tearing up every time I look in the mirror or just freaking out or making comments or squeezing my fat or like, I was just upset. I mean, it was like bordering on dysmorphia. And I don't have that anymore. And it's amazing. It's been replaced by a bit of an obsession about not reversing the results. And because I'm still on this medication and still 33, I don't know how much control I have over that. Um, but yeah, I mean, as I am right now, I like my body and I have way more confidence. And when pants don't fit me, it still freaks me out, but not as much. I'm like, okay, I'll just
Mm-hmm.
go buy new pants. Maybe this means my ass has gotten bigger and I always wanted that. So,
When you were obsessing about these things, like you're saying like looking at your stomach fat, did you like what are you worried about? If you gain weight or have a body that you don't want, what is the risk for you? Why does it mean so much?
mm, it's hard to describe. I mean, it's not like I think Jason won't love me anymore, but one of my fears was that I attracted him during a time when I was very thin and that I had led him to believe that I would always be like that because I had said things like that. And I felt like I betrayed him by gaining weight. Of course, he did not endorse any of that. That's my own psycho shit. But I mean, I came from a family that like highly valued thinness, and I think it felt like if I gained weight, I'd be like a second class citizen in certain ways.
In
I would be
in your
living
family or in the world?
in the world.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and in I mean, whatever. My family wasn't gonna like lower my status or anything, but yeah, I think one of the things that really got to me was like The Bachelor. I mean, at first it gave me a lot of confidence because I didn't see myself as one of those girls, and then I was one of those girls, and Ari liked me enough to like never break up with me, you know? So I was like, oh wow, I actually have a place among them. And then I started gaining weight, and all of them stayed like microscopic and had were so toned and perfect looking, and like there's two pictures of me in a bikini on Instagram, and I'm hiding my stomach in both of them. So,
Mm.
I never saw myself as having that body type that was ideal. And um and it was unattainable. I mean, I I had like no fat on my, but all of it was on my stomach. And so I just didn't like how I looked ever. And I guess as I was gaining weight, especially where I gain it, I was just like, I no longer look like a bachelor girl. I no longer look like one of these women. And um, I don't know, that was hard. And like in New York, I mean, I used to be approached all the time. People would approach me on the subway, ask me out, talk about how beautiful I was, yada, yada, yada. And that stopped. And I don't know if it's because I'm older or fatter or because people don't do that anymore.
Hmm.
But I would just notice things like that, right? I'd be like, is it my weight? Is it my age? Like, what's going on? Why aren't I wanted in the same ways?
Mm.
I mean, I got a lot of social capital from being thin and pretty. A lot of free
Hmm.
dinners, a lot of free drinks, a lot of free Broadway shows, like a lot of free vacations. I mean, a lot came out of it. And
Hmm.
I'm very reluctant to lose that power.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely sets your identity in many ways. People orient differently to women
Mhm.
who are thin and pretty versus not, which is so sad. But I've always been on the other side where I just like didn't have access to that identity and didn't even build up that kind of part of my body image. Like I valued, I mean, we're talking about this a lot, but I valued like my academic abilities and like other parts of my personality over my body. And it wasn't until college where I was dating people who actually liked like fuller figured women.
Mhm.
Um, but these past few years have been weird for me because I got pregnant, had a baby, and was like very overweight, and my body changed a lot. Like it really, from aesthetic, like cosmetic aesthetic, I definitely changed. Like I had that belly fat that I realized that everyone gets when they have a baby. Not everyone, but like most people get when they're a baby. I'm sorry. Like the lower belly, your fupa definitely gets a little fat after you have a baby.
Yeah.
And then my hips kind of still stayed wide, and then my boobs changed a lot throughout pregnancy and breastfeeding, and then after. Like I had like these perky C cups, and then it was like they were like pretty heavy and droopy afterwards. But so I already went through like a body identity change where I was really like, oh my God, am I just, if this is what I am now? I'm like this middle aged woman. And then I got cancer. And I mean, all of that time was just a solid time where my body didn't feel like in my control. Like, it was hard to ever feel um any kind of like self-esteem in my physicality and sexuality. Like I knew I had to probably go on, build up social media presence earlier and stuff like, but I was just so insecure. Like my hair was falling out, I got skinny in a weird way, right? So like my body and my boobs went through so much transformation that I've lost any attachment to what I barely remember what I used to look like.
Yeah.
But then the plastic surgery was hugely beneficial to me. Like I was so against it before, and then now I'm like, oh yeah, great, because I went from I I actually had this emotional reaction. I had one interview or consultation with a surgeon who was just like, okay, yeah, so what kind of surgery do you want? You could get like a lumpectomy where you just cut it out and keep your natural boobs. We could get mastectomy where you could take one breast out and like replace it fully with an implant, or double mastectomy, which is like you take both of them out and just only have implants, right? Um, and to be left with that choice, like, do I want to keep my boobs? I was terrified. And then they said, yeah, if you want a double mastectomy and just get implants, we're gonna have to remove your nipples entirely.
Yeah.
And I didn't
Um,
even know that was an option. I was like, oh, but I thought there's no cancer in the nipples. They're like, yeah, but it'll be in the wrong place because your boobs are so droopy that your nipples will be below the implant. And so the picture of me just losing my breasts and losing my nipples, I was overwhelmed. I just didn't know how to make that decision. And all these different decisions have implications for like
yeah.
how likely is cancer going to come back. And if I wanted to keep my boobs, I could keep them if I was really hoping to breastfeed again, right? So it was just like these long-term choices that I just like panicked and ran away from that consultation. And luckily, I had um, a what's called a breastie, like a friend who's had breast cancer, and she really encouraged me to do all their consultations with other plastic surgeons because plastic surgery, even in this kind of cancer context, is really personal, and I didn't know that. So I found a plastic surgeon who's a woman who really made a difference to have a woman plastic surgeon, and she just like asked me what I want for my boobs and like respected that and um found a cool way to actually keep my nipples by doing this other different procedure, and it just basically made the shape of boobs that I wanted and gave me the implants that I wanted. And at first I was just like in the hole of survival. I was just like, okay, oh, what's the lowest risk of recurrence? So I'd like, what's the safest? Okay, I'll just do double mastectomy. But now I was like, oh my God, for the first time in years, I'm able to actually have control over the way I look in my body.
Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
I hadn't in so long. So I was like, oh, I could finally feel like an attractive person again. Um, and yeah, I mean, here are my new fake boobs, and I love them because it's like, first of all, it makes me feel safe.
Wait, for those
And
of
second
you
of
who are
all,
on YouTube, Kibby is lifting up her shirt and showing you her naked breasts on YouTube. So,
so now go to YouTube and that's right. See some boob shots. No, just kidding. Return it back to normalcy. Yeah. I I definitely feel like a lot more confident in myself. And like what happened was I had three different surgeries. First one was to remove the cancer and to lift the boobs up and put the nipples in the right place, which is crazy. It was like origami with my boobs. The second was to the mastectomy, removal of all the tissue. So I was flat chested. I was like, like small A cup. And then they, in that step, they put balloons, these called things called expanders, in my breast. And every week they'd fill it up with water. So I literally had water balloons like inflating my breasts until I was like, okay, that's good. I like the size. And then she switched it out for implants. So that's like the crazy. That was my summer, right? Like I've had we counted like 10 different boobs since started dating my husband. So he's seen 10 different sets of
It's fucking
titties.
crazy.
Um, it is crazy. It's crazy because it's a thing that you identify with, right? Like for women, there, as you were saying, like the physical part, like your physical body and attractiveness is a lot, informs a lot of your identity sometimes. And what kind of boobs you have, like makes a difference sometimes. So I did read the research that people who've had, especially um, boob jobs and especially breast reductions, are the happiest with their outcomes because,
Really?
yeah, yeah, that's like one of the most like, I mean, always patient preparation and expectations makes a difference in how you feel about the outcome. That's like the number one thing that predicts how happy you are with the results. If
Yeah.
you're thinking that you're going to be like a perfect Barbie, whatever, then you're going to be unhappy, right? Even though I'm happy with my boobs, there's still scars. There's still like weird, like there's rippling, Like it when I look myself in my mirror in the mirror and I move, you could see kind of like the ripple of the implant underneath the skin, so it doesn't look like a boob sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, so there is a little bit of like, ugh, like a foreignness to it. But if you have realistic expectations, um, you could be happy, especially if you breast reduction. So actually, another thing, I also got lipo. I got fat sucked out of my stomach and put into my boob to make that like normal looking. So it doesn't look like a bubble, right? So it just looks like a boob. So I got the works, and I am into it.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that well, not results, but like happiness would depend also a lot on the surgery that you get because lipo is somewhat reversible. I mean, the fat cells can't grow back, but if there's fat remaining, then that can explode. And so, so I feel some paranoia about gaining that weight back. And since it's about fat, like fat gr grows or like you gain it or you lose it. Like it's always in flux. So that's something that there's, I think, a desire to control. There are other procedures, like a nose job, for instance, where it's just changed.
Yeah.
And you don't have to think about it after that, And I mean, I've gotten like moles removed and like dumb like some other procedures, where it was like an insecurity of mine has been deleted and I never have to think about it again.
Hmm.
And that was great. Like no complaints.
Hmm.
Um, and breast implants are somewhat like that. I mean, there's fat involved, but nobody usually doesn't mind if their boobs get like a little bit bigger. Um, unless you're starting with like, Titanic twins. But I think the fat removal ones are interesting because is there an ideal that you're trying to get to? Can you ever reach that ideal? Do you have to be constantly concerned about then gaining weight? It feels like a different ball game. Are you experiencing that at all with the lipo portion of what you got?
Yeah, I mean, that part was probably the most unrealistic expectation because I was like, oh my God. I just, when I unlocked the possibility that I could get plastic surgery, it was like, oh, I could have this like control over myself. It's covered by insurance, so I have that luck.
Yeah.
But, or lack of luck, if you want to look at it that way. But I was like, oh my God, I could come out with these perky new boobs and then no fat on my tummy.
Yeah.
And the so everyone knows if you get liposuction, it's just like sucking out the fat. It's not that invasive, but you can't take too much out or your skin will sag, right? It will start to look um like Austin Powers. What was that? A fat bastard when he got skinny and all of his skin was loose. I don't know if
I've
you
never
haven't
seen
seen
Austin
Austin
Powers.
Powers.
But
What?
yeah, I know, that's crazy, right? And I was the normal age to see it. It just
Oh
never.
my God. Well, that's okay. You got to see that. That's homework assignment number one. But if a tummy tuck is like removing the fat and then they cut off the skin a little bit, right? So when you have a tuck, you basically have like fat and skin removed, and that's a really invasive procedure. So I didn't have that. I just they took out a little and put it on my boobs, and I was like, there's some fantasies of coming out like this perfect body, and I'm like, oh, okay, like I look a little bit more tone, like a little more myself pre-baby, but like I'm not like super skinny. And yeah, like the holidays rolled around and I definitely packed
Dude.
on them back. And it also is a little ripply, like at the where I got lipo at least, it's still a little bit like there's like it's like a different shape, right? There's little lumps and they're like the skin kind of folds in a different way. Not
Yeah.
horribly, not in a way that I would really care about, but if you're expected to come out looking like
Yeah.
perfect Barbie, then,
I mean, I was able to get more taken because I have not been pregnant previously, so my skin was not stretched the
Oh,
way yours
interesting.
was. Yeah. So Kibby basically could only get some taken out because she had pregnancy, so her skin was already naturally stretched, and so if you take more out, then it's going to stretch more. I have my perfect pre-body body or pre-baby body, and so I was able to take a lot more. And I think mine changed my body type. Like I have an hourglass figure now, which I never had before. I was like an inverted triangle before. It drove me fucking crazy. But um, yeah, I mean, I feel loads better. I don't have the thought. I hate my body. I hate my body. Why am I so fat? Why do I look like this? Why do I
Hmm.
look like this? Don't look in the mirror. Look in the mirror, though. See whether it's really that bad. Oh, it's not that bad today. Oh, wait, but in this lighting, it is that bad. Oh my God, now there's cellulite. What am I gonna do? Now I'm trying on my old clothes and they don't fit, and I like you can see it through. I can see the stomach fat through the fabric and all this shit. And now I'm like buying sweater dresses, and I'm able to have more of a snatched waist, and it's great. It's also temporary because I do want babies, so we'll, you know, we'll see about how things go there. But I think there's this question of like, should we attempt to love our natural bodies and not try to surgically alter them? Is that the better mental health
Interesting.
route? Do you have initial thoughts on that?
Always, because I think that um, people with body dysmorphia and problem like obsessive problems with body image are from the research aren't that happy with the result when they're trying to, especially body dysmorphia is like this, you're obsessed over a minor defect, like you think your nose is too big and you just like obsess over this one piece.
Yeah,
Well, getting that surgery might lead you to the Michael Jackson situation where you're constantly like trying to redo it. And not only is that tricky, but if you have identity issues like attached to a personality disorder, those are the people who are the most upset with the outcomes, especially with the rhinoplasty, with nose jobs.
hmm,
Yeah, isn't that cool? Because they like their identity, they're trying to seek identity and trying to figure that out, and then you get a nose job and then your whole face changes, right? The structure of it changes. So those are the patients who tend to try to get reversal surgeries to try to
that's
capture the sense of self or image that they identify with.
yeah,
So
that's why. So, like, I got fat taken out from under my chin, but even your doctor at first was like, I don't think she needs that. I think she needs chin implants or not implant, chin implant or like filler or something. And I rejected that because I don't want my face to change. Like,
yeah.
it's the same thing with lip filler. Like, I have thinner lips, and sometimes I'm like, God, I hate how they look when I talk, but I don't really want to look different. I would do shit to my face if it reversed aging and made me look more like how I've always looked, because that aging freaks me out for a similar reason. I don't want my face to look like a different person's face.
Hmm.
Um, but I just, I mean, okay, look, if you have just body dysmorphia, then doing plastic surgery is really risky because you risk getting more and more of it and never being happy with it. And because the problem isn't necessarily your body part. It's a it's a psychological process that's going on. And so if you continually try to fix the body part, then what happens to the psychological process? Well, it doesn't necessarily go away. Now, if you have like an obviously flawed, I'm putting that in quotes, body part, and it really is like, I just fucking hate my nose. And I hate it because other people react to me in a particular way. I've lost dates because of, like there are consequences and you get that nose changed, then problem solved. But if it's more like I just can't accept myself for who I am, I have this obsession with myself and my image that won't go away, and there's nothing I can do, then it's a bigger problem. Um,
Yeah. I think if you're thinking, noticing it in yourself, noticing if you're the kind of person who chases perfection or an ideal and never feels satisfied with it, right?
mhm,
It's one thing if you're like, I like things this way, and when I achieve that goal, I'm satisfied. Of course, you
mhm,
might have new goals, but there's some people's brains with a kind of an OCD flair who's just like, I'm uncomfortable and I'm in distress until I get this ideal. Oh, I got the ideal, it was satisfying for 2 seconds and then now it's uncomfortable again, right? Like the kind of hamster wheel of discomfort.
yeah,
Then plastic surgery, it's going to be addictive and deceptive because it's this feeling that you have like a lot of control, right? And they sell you on it, right? They're like, you could
mhm,
change the way you look entirely. So you're like, wow, this identity piece that I have just kind of subjected myself to, I can actually have full control. And
mhm.
then when you do try to control it, that as you said, the psychological process doesn't stop. So yeah, it's basically giving you the keys. It's like if you have someone with like a dirt phobia and you give them like Lysol spray,
Yeah.
you have like this thing that gives them like a sense of like, oh, I finally got the answer. And then it's not the answer. It's actually both outside and in, you know?
Well, right, because the dirt isn't actually the problem for somebody with a dirt phobia. It's
Yeah.
a need to control anxiety, and that's
Hmm.
different. And for whatever reason, it's glommed onto dirt as being the target, but dirt is more of like a representation or a symbol or something of this of this attempt to control anxiety.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it can be hard to tell. Like I don't think I fit neatly into either camp. I mean, most people would look at my prior self and be like, "You're beautiful. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, why can't you love your body?" Um, you know, Me getting lipo is not going to change my romantic partner. I'm not going to like go out and I'm not going to go out and like marry Brad Pitt or anything. Like, I'm sticking with Jason. He loved me before, he loves me after. Um, but I don't necessarily I do feel less obsessed now. Um, I think eating is still going to be an issue for me because I'm going to want to maintain the results. And so now it's about maintenance rather than change. I don't want to change
Hmm.
how I look. I want to maintain how I look. And that is pretty much just as oppressive when it comes to eating.
Hmm.
Uh, But this question of just like, okay, like let's say you don't have body dysmorphia, you don't have BPD, you don't have identity issues, but you are really bothered by some way that you look, like aging, like
Hmm.
is it bad to get Botox, to dye your hair, to get filler, to do all this shit? And it's a hard question to answer because it reminds me a little bit of when people don't want to use Google Maps because they want to maintain their sense of direction.
Hmm.
Kind of like, you're right, it would be amazing to have a sense of direction, but Google Maps is right there. So do you actually need to have that skill?
Hmm.
You know, do I
Yeah.
need to love my fat distribution pattern if I can just get it changed? Like, is it worth putting the effort into loving that when I could put my energy elsewhere and easily get this fit, like get this changed?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it all goes back to expectations, and why are you doing it? So I think the question is, why do you want the plastic surgery? Like, what do you think, what do you imagine it could do for you or give you? It's interesting because there was some research showing that people in problematic relationships tend to want cosmetic procedures, right? So people who the predictors of interest in cosmetic surgery are being single, having bad relationships with parents, and multiple sexual partners all increase your chance of wanting plastic surgery. And
Makes
if you
sense.
are going to, yeah, it makes sense, right? And it's also like low self-esteem and how do you relate to people, how attractive they find you, how do they see you. But people who think that they're going to change their um, relationships through plastic surgery, like apparently hopes to improve their family status or personal relationship quality,
Hmm.
are also very unhappy with the results because yeah, you can change the way you look, but there's so much more to a relationship than just like physically how you look, right?
Yeah.
There's just like your self-esteem. There's like all other stuff that um if just getting skinny change all of that, then it would be realistic, but it doesn't. So,
Fun story on that. I've talked extensively about how my mom and sister have commented on my weight and it's been an issue or whatever. My sister's actually probably the worst one. My mom, atoned and apologized and all of that. Like, uh, but I was trying on, my sister brought over a bunch of clothes and she's smaller than me, and I could fit into some of them and it was very exciting. And I have more of an hourglass figure now, so like, and I have gained weight, and lipo actually doesn't change your weight that much, which is a fun fact.
hmm,
It's also somewhat of a mystery because you do remove fat, and fat does weigh something, but the scale doesn't change all that much, so it's very bizarre.
you
Anyway,
do swell. You get a lot of fluid retention, so
yeah,
just it takes months to heal from it. Just
yeah,
FYI.
yeah. Anyways, I tried on some dress and I was like, oh my God, I kind of have an ass in this. Like, I'm hoping that's where all my fat goes from now on. And she goes, no, that's big enough. So it's just
Ouch.
like, I mean, it just shows how shifting it can be, right? If somebody
Yeah.
wants to, degrade you
Tear
for
you
how you
down. Yeah.
look, and they'll just find something new. So yeah, I mean, it's probably not going to massively change relationships unless it massively changes your confidence and self-esteem. I would
Hmm.
think that would have an effect on your relationships.
Do you think people, your family or otherwise, react to you differently after you've got some lipo?
I think my brothers thought I was crazy. Um, my mother is excited.
Really?
Oh yeah. Um, I don't think my dad was ever good. I mean,
What did she
yeah.
say? Was she like, good
You look
job?
adorable. You look adorable. That kind of thing.
Uh-huh. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's nice.
Yeah, she wasn't a bitch about it at all.
But I think it
Yeah.
definitely would cement some core belief if suddenly your family were like, ah, now you're worthy again. Or, other people on the street were like,
Yeah.
oh,
I mean, I experience actually a lot of, I feel like, capital in my family. I don't really know what the right word is. Like, I'm probably the kid who's closest to my mom right now. Um, so yeah, I mean, so I don't actually feel like I have a downgraded position in my family, depending on weight or anything. It's just like, do I want to catch comments or not? Um, so I mean, whatever. I feel more comfortable going home now, that's for sure.
hmm,
Especially if it's, if there's a beach weekend involved. But
interesting.
but I do think my self-esteem is higher now, and I just have more space in my head because I was just so the amount of times that I would like you would just catch me like grabbing my stomach fat, just like holding it and like squeezing it and feeling for granules and all this shit. I mean, it was like kind of insane. I spent a lot of energy worrying about how I looked. And I do that less. It's not gone. Yesterday I had a freak out because I binge ate, and then the next day tried on pants and I still couldn't fit into them. And I was like, what the fuck? I'm gaining it all back. And then texted you obsessively. Um, but it is really nice to like what my body looks like. That's
Hmm.
definitely different. And yeah, and I think the expectation that people figure out how to love themselves is a little bit cruel, and there's a lot of it's just like a kind of unrealistic. We live in a society that like heavily rewards people for looking a particular way.
Yeah.
And when you say to women who don't look that way, hey, you should just love yourself instead. You shouldn't get surgery. Like, you shouldn't get what's available to change you and get all this social reward. You should just love yourself. It's kind of like, yeah, well, fuck you. Like, how am I supposed to
Yeah,
just
but
do that?
I do see the value in the loving yourself no matter what you look like because and I that was
Well, there's
hard. Like
definitely,
I
of course,
didn't
there's
feel
value
that.
in it.
Yeah, the value is that what I think what carries more is the confidence, right? Like you could see someone who's not like perfect, like picture perfect, but carries himself at thinking that they're attractive and thinking that they're worthy. And that could do a lot more than a really physically pretty person with low self-esteem who doesn't carry themselves well, right? Because actually, like I mean, we're talking about plastic surgery, but there's all sorts of stuff. At this point, you could just put filters on everything, right? And then you could get your hair done. You could get makeup. Like, there's a lot of transformation to your looks that you can do
Yeah,
non-surgically. Like, I don't even know Botox and all that stuff. That's, tattooing eyebrows, like, eyelashes, right? Like, there's so many modifications you could do to your physical form. And what carries a lot more is how you see yourself, your confidence in yourself.
absolutely.
So if the
I mean,
actual plastic surgery doesn't make a difference, then it's not going to make a difference.
I think there's, of course, value in loving yourself. I mean, that's the ideal. That is what we want. And point taken that like actually attractiveness does come a lot more from from confidence than from physical features. I just think it's a tall ask to tell women or men like, why would you get plastic surgery? That's ridiculous. Like, you're just love yourself instead. Like, well, just
Mhm.
accept yourself as you are. Because, yeah, like, I wish I could do that. And maybe if I tried harder, I could. But I've been trying pretty hard for a pretty long fucking time. And meanwhile, I'm living in an ecosystem where women are punished for not looking perfect. And so are men, you know? I mean, I'm just a woman getting surgery, so people are punished for not looking a certain way, and they're really, really rewarded for looking a certain way. And, you know, like my peer group in particular is pretty fucking intimidating when it comes to that. It's like a bunch of bachelor
Hmm.
girls, you know? And it's just, it's hard when it's like, okay, I, and that's not like I hate myself. You know, I have pretty high self-esteem in most ways. There are some notable exceptions, but this was a notable exception. And I don't know, would it be worth it to just put in more effort trying to like think myself into knots, trying to decide that the thing that I was seeing with my eyes was actually attractive to me when I didn't think that it
Hmm.
was? Um, I don't know at what point it's legitimate to make the decision to just do something else. I do think it's interesting that there's way less judgment for certain sort of body modifications than there are for others. And I think invasiveness is something that makes sense. You know, like Botox is, you're not going to die under anesthesia for getting Botox. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, and now we are in the land of Ozempic, right? So that's not
yes.
even a surgery, that's a medication, but that is like, the thinking about the difference in how we view Ozempic versus liposuction, right? Like
Yeah, that's a good point.
those are two medical interventions that do the same thing. I'm thinking that when we're talking about this, it all feels like an issue of control, right? How
Mm,
much control do you need over your identity and physical looks? What does control mean to you? Do you have the means to control without and it being adaptable? For example, like if I thought, oh, I can get the body type I want, I just need to do these diets and exercise and whatever and do things that I know I can do, then that would feel different than like the only way I can get to this body type is if I have these intensive, expensive surgeries, risky surgeries, and I can't do that, right? So if something feels like out of your control versus your control, and then what are your expectations for that finished outcome? Like, are
yeah.
you expecting it to change your life? Are you expecting to become like a perfect version of yourself? Like, um, or is it like, oh yeah, actually, like for me, having boobs that look like what I used to pre-baby, and like I'm a little bit more perfectionistic when it comes to the way I feel in my body. Like I have very particular ways of like my shoulders and my back and my like the way things move.
Hmm.
So this feels a lot more like what I used to feel, and that makes me feel good. That makes me feel more quote myself. So I don't
Yeah.
know.
No, I think it's interesting. If I had a patient and we were talking about acceptance, it's like, when do you accept?
Mm.
Well, often that's when you can't control.
Hmm.
Like, if you can't change something, then you have to accept it because you're really out of options at that point. But here we're talking about something that you actually can change. And so, when do you just say, I accept myself as I am, versus when do you say, no, actually, I'm just going to pay a little bit of money and then I can be different. And then I don't have to do this whole like work of acceptance.
Yeah.
Um, and I think another, you know, interesting point with like Ozempic is, yeah, I mean, people say like diet and exercise, just diet and as if willpower. There's so much, like if somebody loses weight through diet and exercise, it's like, wow, you have willpower, you have
Hmm.
discipline, all of these things. It's incredible. It's like, well, first of all, there are all sorts of things that go into whether you can gain or lose weight. You know, I eat like pretty fucking well and I work out and I wasn't losing weight. And I also was, you can't target weight loss. And so lipo is really a contouring thing. But it's like, okay, but even in that situation where you diet and exercise, you're not just accepting your body as it is, you're changing your body. And so then what does self-love really mean? Like,
Hmm.
does you love yourself less because you go under a knife versus you change your diet completely? I don't know. And the other thing, and so like that's relevant with Ozempic too. Like, do we call people lazy for just getting on Ozempic versus diet and exercise? Well, we also live in in a society where our food is terrible and it's addictive and poisonous and you know, like and the food that is marketed to us is even more addictive and poisonous. And so is it realistic to expect people to just slim down when they're up against these huge odds. Like we
Hmm.
have a societal problem. It's an economic problem where the food that's good for us is less available. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, like what do you expect people to do in the face of that?
I think then we lean to dialectical behavior therapy with dialectics, where it's like the and situation. It's not like you have to accept yourself or change, right? You could
Yeah.
accept yourself and change. You ideally you love yourself and your body and for who you are, and feel good when you know, lose some weight or change the way you look, So ideally you have a foundation of self-acceptance, self-love, with on top of it being like, well, if I change this about my behavior, if I change this about my appearance, if I change whatever, like have changes above that that
Yeah.
adds to the value and not like is the sole source of how you feel about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems a little bit utopian to just be like, oh, just accept everything about yourself. And like we shave our legs. I mean, there's just certain things we're very used to not accepting certain things about ourselves on like a daily basis. But yeah, I think you can love yourself and get plastic surgery. You can generally love the way you look and be like, you know what, I'd be a little bit
Yeah.
happier if this were tweaked. One thing though that is important to me is like part of the reason I want to do this podcast is I am a bachelor girl and I don't want to just give people the impression that it's easy to look a particular way. Like there is a lot of luck involved. There's a lot of money involved. Um, Diet and exercise don't always like perfectly work. And sometimes it's not worth it to spend your entire life exercising. So, uh, I guess I want people to understand that there are a lot of ways to beauty. And if you
Hmm.
don't naturally look a particular way, then that doesn't necessarily mean that you look that different than people who seem beautiful, because maybe they've
Hmm.
done stuff.
Yeah, and you would think that me going through cancer, I'd be like, oh, I just love my body for what it is. I have more self-acceptance for life, and I do. But now I also am more into the plastic surgery and appearance because I was like, I've had so many years of feeling like out of my body and at war with my body, and I really miss. I think apparently this is like body image issues is a big thing for younger women who have cancer, breast cancer, because they're like I want to feel like a 39-year-old woman who's like sexy and in a new relationship and like yeah, I have a kid, but like I don't want to give up on feeling like I'm like an attractive woman, right? I don't want to just like let my body go both like health-wise and sexuality. So yeah, like I'm now excited that I got that I came out of this looking better than I thought before, and it actually does make a difference in my self-esteem. I'm not ashamed about that.
That's awesome. Are you thinking about getting more stuff?
Yeah. 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 I don't know. I'm gonna try different, like not nothing major, but I never wanted to get. I always thought like, would I get a nose job or live for it, whatever? And I was like, no, because I look like my dad. Like I have my dad's nose,
Mhm.
and I want to keep that from
Mhm.
him. I want to keep that part of my dad. But yeah, I'm gonna look into things of I don't know about Botox because my facial expressions are really important to me in our work, but I don't know, something to tighten up the face. I'm learning about all sorts of weird stuff out there that we could cover in future podcasts. But like you could take your blood, spin it in a centrifuge, put the good blood blackened back into your face and boobs, and that magically does things. I don't know, man, but it is a wide open world of chasing perfection for me after this. So I
Yay!
could document the before and afters with this podcast. So stay tuned. I do also want to say that there's a lot of health risks with this stuff. So it's not stuff to play around, especially with young kids. Like young kids with surgeries is really high risk for your health. One, if you get liposuction around your tummy, apparently you can still get fat around your organs. So you'll have this weird barrel look if you keep
Yeah.
getting liposuction because fat still grows inside you.
Yeah.
Two, breast implants, especially crappy versions, and this like rippled kind of implant was linked to cancer, to other kinds of cancers. So
Mm.
really do your research about the health risks, because if you get cancer, that's, you're not going to be hot no matter what. So, you know,
A cheerful message to end on.
the end.
So, okay, but the overall is that most people are happy once they get plastic, like with their.
Yeah, psychosocial outcomes and plastic surgery are positive, granted, like what people go in for, to getting them for, and what their expectations are. So,
Okay.
set expectations low, really do your research, make sure the risk makes sense, and, you know, then go forward. Cut them up.
I mean, I'm definitely happy that I've gotten the things done to myself that I have. Um, I couldn't be more pleased, really. So,
So
um,
get plastic surgery except for Kybella.
except for Guy Bella's
That's
bad.
our conclusion to this episode.
Guy Bella's bad. Well, listen, I mean, if you think we're perfect the way we are, then just let us know that, give us 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And we'll keep trying to attain perfection week after week for the rest of our time with you. And we'll see you next week. By accessing this podcast, I acknowledge that the hosts of this podcast make no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast and any and all content or services available on or through this podcast are provided for general, non-commercial informational purposes only and do not constitute the practice of medical or any other professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and should not be considered or used as a substitute for the independent professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment of a duly licensed and qualified healthcare provider. In case of a medical emergency, you should immediately call 911. The hosts do not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement.